The man in the gray shirt. The night was meant to be one of celebration, glitter, and names that made headlines. The luxurious rooftop of a high-rise hotel in Los Angeles gleamed with gold trim, chandeliers hanging like crystal vines above a marble floor. Outside, city lights sparkled like diamonds, and inside, laughter echoed off the glass walls, bouncing between high heels, tuxedos, and perfectly poured champagne. Guests wore watches worth more than some people's homes. Every detail was curated, from the sushi flown in from Tokyo to the jazz band flown in from New Orleans. This party wasn't just a gathering, it was a stage, and everyone was performing. Then someone walked in wearing a gray shirt, slightly wrinkled, and a pair of old black boots. He moved quietly, almost trying not to disturb anything. No entourage, no loud entrance, no camera-ready smile. Just a man with kind eyes and a peaceful silence around him. People stared. Some raised eyebrows. Others whispered, "Who let him in?" A man in a velvet blazer sneered. "He looks like a mechanic," a woman near the bar said with a smirk. The man didn't seem to hear. Or maybe he just didn't care. He found a quiet spot near the edge of the rooftop, looking out at the city below, sipping from a glass of water. He smiled at the view like he had seen it 1,000 times but still found it beautiful. A young woman approached him, frowning. Her name tag read Event Manager, Claire. "Sir," she said politely but firmly, "are you with one of the invited guests?" He looked at her and smiled gently. "I believe so." "And what name would that be under?" "Keanu." "Keanu." She waited. "Reeves." There was a pause. She stared, trying to hide her confusion. Then her lips tightened. "I'm sorry, sir, but this is a private event. Only those on the guest list may stay." Keanu nodded slowly. "I understand." She waited for him to argue, to flash credentials, to demand respect. But he didn't. Instead, he finished his water, placed the glass on a nearby table, and with a soft "thank you," began walking toward the elevator. Guests watched, some smirking, others still unaware of what just happened. A few laughed. "Did you see that?" A tall man in a white tux whispered. "He didn't even try to explain himself." "Probably some nobody trying to sneak in for free food," someone else added. But not everyone laughed. An older man by the bar, wearing a subtle black suit and a soft expression, had watched the entire scene. His brow furrowed as he pulled out his phone, tapped a number, and spoke quietly. "He was invited," the man said into the phone. "By me." Claire was about to return to her post when her headset crackled. "Bring him back," the voice said. "Now." She froze. "Excuse me?" "Bring him back." Downstairs, the elevator doors opened. Keanu stepped out into the quiet lobby. He looked out toward the parking area, but didn't move right away. His posture was calm, almost peaceful, but behind his eyes there was a deep sadness. Not anger, not embarrassment, just something gentle and heavy, like a memory he hadn't let go of. Then he heard footsteps. "Mr. Reeves!" Claire called out, now rushing toward him, breathless. "I'm so sorry. There's been a mistake. Please come back. You were invited. Personally." Keanu turned and gave her the same gentle smile. "It's all right," he said softly. "You were just doing your job." "Please," she said again, her voice breaking slightly. "Everyone's waiting upstairs." Keanu nodded, though part of him clearly didn't want to go back. He followed her, quietly, just like before. As the elevator rose, Claire couldn't stop glancing at him. "I really didn't recognize you," she admitted. "I mean, not like this." "That's the point," he said. "I like being invisible, sometimes." She didn't know how to respond. When the doors opened, the rooftop had gone strangely quiet. The music still played, but softly now. Eyes turned. Voices dropped. One by one, people realized who had just walked back in. "Wait, That's Keanu Reeves. Oh no. He was asked to leave? The old man in the black suit stepped forward. He was a legendary film director, one who rarely showed his face in public anymore. He walked up to Keanu with open arms. "There you are," he said warmly. "I was starting to think Hollywood had finally scared you off." Keanu hugged him. "Almost." Then the director turned to the crowd. "For those of you wondering," he said loudly, "this man right here is the only reason I'm even standing here tonight. And if anyone in this room thinks his shirt is more important than his heart, maybe you're the ones who don't belong." There was silence. Keanu didn't speak. He didn't need to. Some people looked down in shame. Others tried to pretend they hadn't judged him. But the truth had already landed. And it was loud, even in silence. The rest of the night went on. Music resumed. Laughter returned. But something had changed. Keanu stayed near the edge of the rooftop again, still quiet, still peaceful. This time, no one asked him to leave. A few even came to speak with him, shyly, hoping to apologize or just say hello. He listened kindly to every word, never bitter, never cold. Later that night, Claire brought him another glass of water. "You?" "No," she said gently. "You could have told me who you were." Keanu took the glass and smiled. "But then you wouldn't have shown me who you were." He stayed until the stars were the only lights left above. As he left the party, the same whispers followed him. But now they were different. He didn't even get angry. "Did you see how kind he was? I'll never forget that." And somewhere in the crowd, a young man whispered to his friend, "I want to be like that someday." This was only the beginning. The story behind the boots, the next morning, news had already begun to spread. It wasn't just a whisper in Hollywood anymore. It had found its way into headlines, blog posts, and quiet conversations between assistants in office elevators. Keanu. Reeves humiliated at elite party. His response leaves crowd speechless. The most humble man in Hollywood just reminded everyone why he's different. Most of the guests at the party had already tried to forget what happened. But for Claire, the event manager, sleep had not come easy. She had tossed and turned, her mind replaying the moment she had asked him to leave. She kept thinking about the way he smiled at her, not with anger, not with sarcasm, but with understanding. Her phone buzzed. Another message from her boss. "Apologize, again. Personally. Today." She sighed. Not because she didn't want to, but because she felt like nothing she could say would undo it. Meanwhile, Keanu was sitting in a small cafe just outside downtown. No one noticed him. He liked it that way. The place smelled like fresh bread and cinnamon. Sunlight poured in through the old windows, warming the wooden table where he sat alone. His boots were still dusty, his shirt still simple. And on the chair beside him sat a folded notebook with weathered corners. He was writing again. A young girl walked past, no older than 10, holding her mother's hand. She stared at him for a moment, eyes wide. "Mom," she whispered, "that's John Wick." The mother turned quickly and pulled her daughter away. "Don't stare." Keanu smiled softly. He didn't mind being recognized, but what he loved most was when people saw past the characters and into something real. A soft knock on the cafe window broke his thoughts. He looked up and saw Claire standing outside holding 2 cups of coffee and looking nervous. He opened the door for her. "Hi," she said, stepping in. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all," he replied kindly. "I brought coffee and an apology." He nodded toward the chair across from him. "Then sit." She placed the coffee down and sat, her hands fidgeting. "I've been thinking about last night," she said. "I felt terrible. I was so focused on everything looking perfect that I forgot what actually matters." Keanu nodded slowly. "You were doing your job. Sometimes we all forget what matters." She looked at him closely. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do you dress so simple?" He chuckled softly. Because clothes don't speak louder than actions. She waited, sensing there was more. He looked down at his boots. They were worn, creased around the edges, and stained with old dust. "These boots," he said, tapping them gently, "belonged to my friend. He gave them to me during one of the lowest times in my life. I had just lost someone I loved. Everything felt heavy. I wanted to disappear." Claire listened quietly. He said, "These boots have carried me through some of my darkest days. Now they'll carry you." Keanu paused. "He passed away a year later. I still wear them to remember where I've been and the people who helped me stand again." Claire swallowed hard. "I'm so sorry." "Thank you," he said, still calm. "But I don't wear them for sympathy. I wear them because they remind me to walk humbly. Always." They sat in silence for a while. "I judged you," Claire whispered, ashamed, "without knowing anything." "We all do," he said. "The important thing is what we learn after." Outside, a man in a suit watched them from across the street. He had been at the party last night too, one of the louder voices mocking Keanu's appearance. Now, watching him through the window, something began to shift inside him. He turned and walked away. Not everyone changes at once, but sometimes a single quiet conversation is enough to start something. Later that afternoon, Keanu walked back to his small home tucked in a quiet corner of the city. No gates, no bodyguards, just a porch with a wooden chair and an old plant he watered every day. As he reached his door, he noticed a package waiting for him. No label, no sender. He opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "To the man who reminded us what real value looks like. Thank you. A guest who needed the lesson." Beneath the note was a pair of hand-stitched leather shoes, beautifully made, clearly expensive. Keanu smiled but didn't take them inside. Instead, he left them on the porch with another note. "May these walk with someone who needs them more." That night, someone in the neighborhood took them. A young man who worked night shifts at a warehouse. He had been wearing torn sneakers for weeks. He didn't know who left them, but the next day, he walked with more pride. Meanwhile, Claire's apology had gone viral. Someone at the cafe had snapped a photo of her and Keanu sitting together, drinking coffee, laughing. The caption read, "She asked him to leave a party. Today, she asked him for forgiveness, and he gave it freely." People started talking again. But this time, they weren't laughing at Keanu. They were learning from him. Stories began to surface. Keanu giving up his seat on the subway, helping a stranded driver, donating quietly to children's hospitals. He wasn't just a celebrity anymore. He was a reminder that kindness still existed, that humility could still shine, and that sometimes the person wearing the simplest clothes carries the richest soul. The call that changed everything. 2 days had passed since the party. Keanu's simple gesture, leaving behind the expensive shoes for someone else, was now quietly making waves. No grand post, no announcement. Just a small note and an act of kindness. Still, the story traveled. Not through tabloids, but through whispers, screenshots, and late-night conversations. The internet was curious again. Who was this man, really? Back at the same rooftop hotel, Claire stood in front of her manager, nervously clutching a folder. "He forgave you," the manager said without looking up. "But did you forgive yourself?" Claire paused. "Not yet." The manager finally looked at her. "Good. That means you're still learning." He handed her a new assignment. "You're going to make things right. The board wants Keanu Reeves back for a private event. This time, no velvet ropes, no dress code, just respect." Claire blinked. "But what if he says no? Then we'll know who's really the better person." Keanu was sitting under an old oak tree near a children's hospital when the call came. He had been visiting quietly every week, never for cameras, never for show. Sometimes he read to the kids, sometimes he just listened. Sometimes he simply sat by their side so they didn't feel alone. His phone buzzed. He didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. "Hello. Mr. Reeves? This is Claire, from the party." He smiled gently. "I remember. I was wondering, would you be open to attending another gathering? This one's different. It's small, quiet, just a few people. They want to hear your story." Keanu didn't answer right away. He looked across the garden, where a little girl in a pink headband waved at him. He waved back. "Not for applause," he said finally. "Not for headlines." "No," Claire said quickly. "For something real." After a pause, he replied, "Then I'll come." A week later, the private event took place. Not at a luxury rooftop, but at a community arts center in downtown Los Angeles. The room was simple: wooden floors, paper lanterns hanging above, and folding chairs arranged in a circle. No press, no glitter. Just people. People from all walks of life. Artists, teachers, students, janitors, veterans. Each one had received a personal invitation, hand-picked for their journey, not their fame. Keanu arrived on foot. No limo, no assistant. He wore the same gray shirt and the same old boots. This time, no one blinked. He walked in, nodded gently, and took a seat at the circle. A young man with paint on his hands looked up. "Wait, is that really you?" Keanu smiled. "It's me, just not the movie version." Everyone laughed softly, and the stories began. One by one, people shared. A mother spoke about losing her job and finding strength in her daughter's laughter. A teacher talked about his fear of retiring and feeling forgotten. A teenager confessed he'd been bullied for dressing poorly at school, and finally, Claire stood up. "I judge someone based on clothes," she said, her voice steady. "And in return, he showed me something much greater than style. He showed me grace." Keanu looked at her, eyes warm. When it was his turn, he stood slowly and walked to the center. "We live in a world," he began, "that teaches us to look at the surface, clothes, cars, photos, followers, but all of that fades. What stays is how we treat each other." He paused. "I've made mistakes. I've lost people. I've had days where I didn't want to get out of bed. But the one thing that always pulled me back was kindness. Whether from a stranger, a friend, or a child who just wanted to share a smile." He looked around the room. "You don't have to be famous to make someone's day better. You just have to care." When he finished, no one clapped. Instead, they stood. Every single one of them. In silence. Sometimes, silence is louder than applause. After the event, as people slowly left, one man stayed behind. He was older, in his 60s, and had watched Keanu closely all evening. "Mr. Reeves," he said, approaching, "do you remember a man named Andrew?" Keanu's eyes widened. "Andrew? Andrew Feldman?" The man nodded. "He was my brother," the man said. "You worked with him years ago. He used to talk about you, said you were different, said you once helped him get home after his car broke down on set. He always meant to thank you properly, but he passed away before he could." Keanu swallowed hard. "Andrew was a good man. He said you were the only one who noticed when he was struggling. You didn't just help him that night. You saved him from something darker." There was a pause. "Thank you," the man said. Softly, Keanu's voice cracked. "Thank you for telling me." That night, as Keanu walked home beneath the streetlights, his boots echoed softly against the pavement. He passed by people laughing on sidewalks, cars rushing past, music playing in the distance. He smiled, not because of recognition, but because he had remembered something important. Kindness didn't just heal others, it healed him too. Meanwhile, Claire opened her inbox back at the hotel. Hundreds of messages had poured in after the story from the Arts Center leaked out. I showed the video to my students. Now they want to start a Keanu Kindness Club. I wore my old shoes to work today. For the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. My daughter said she wants to dress like the nice movie man who wears boots. She closed her laptop and looked out the window. Something had started, and it was only growing. The broken stage and the standing ovation. The next month brought a wave of quiet change across the city. Not in billboards, not in trending hashtags, but in how people looked at each other. At a coffee shop in Venice Beach, a young man held the door, open for an older woman carrying groceries. She smiled and said, "Kindness suits you." At a high school across town, students began organizing a Respect First Day where no one wore designer labels, just simple clothes and handwritten notes pinned to their shirts, sharing something true about themselves. And in the offices of the rooftop hotel where it had all started, the dress code policy had been officially changed. We judge no one by how they walk in, only by how they treat others once they do. The printout hung by the main entrance, signed by Claire. But Keanu had no idea. He wasn't following any of it. He was in a small town, miles away from Los Angeles, attending a community theater event. No one knew he was at. He had quietly sponsored the rebuilding of an old playhouse that had nearly closed after the pandemic. When they ran out of funds halfway through construction, he stepped in, anonymously. Only the local carpenter and the theater teacher knew the truth. That night, he sat in the last row, surrounded by folding chairs and families. The lights flickered as a group of nervous teenagers walked onto the stage. Some forgot their lines. One girl tripped on a curtain. The crowd giggled kindly. Keanu watched with more attention than he had ever given a movie premiere. It was halfway through the second act when something snapped, literally. A section of the wooden stage cracked and caved slightly, and one of the teenage actors fell to her knees in surprise. She wasn't hurt, but her eyes welled with embarrassment. The room tensed. Someone in the front row gasped. A few murmurs spread through the seats, and then, before anyone else could move, Keanu stood up and walked calmly to the edge of the stage. He didn't say a word. He offered the girl his hand, helped her up gently, and turned to the crowd. "The best performances," he said softly, "are the ones where we keep going, even when the floor beneath us gives way." The room froze. Then slowly people began to rise from their seats. Not because the play had ended, but because the moment had become something more, a standing ovation, not for the script, but for the courage it takes to fall and still finish the story. The girl wiped her tears and smiled. She finished her lines, stronger than before, and Keanu returned quietly to the last row. After the show, the theater teacher approached him backstage. "Thank you," she said, eyes full. "It wasn't just for her," he replied. "It was for every kid in the audience who thinks a mistake means it's over." She nodded. "They'll never forget it." He smiled. "Neither will I." The next morning, photos of the moment had begun to appear online, but not the kind Keanu was used to. This wasn't paparazzi. These were cell phone shots from proud parents and stunned kids. One image stood out, a grainy photo of Keanu helping the girl up the cracked stage behind them, the girl's face lit with surprise, his calm presence steady beside her. Someone captioned it, "He didn't fix the floor, he fixed the fear." The image went viral, slowly but powerfully. No hashtags, no sponsors, just truth. And then came a call Keanu didn't expect. A well-known journalist from a major outlet reached out. Not for gossip, not for a scandal, but for something different. "We've been following the ripple effect," the journalist said. "It started at that rooftop party and has reached everywhere. Kids, families, entire communities. We want to tell your story, the real one." Keanu paused. "Why now?" he asked. The journalist answered softly. "Because people are tired of fake. They're hungry for something real. And you've been feeding them. without ever asking for credit. After a long silence, Keanu agreed, but with one condition. "Don't make me the hero," he said. "Make the kindness the hero." The journalist nodded. Deal. The interview aired the following week. It was quiet, honest, filled with pauses and thoughtful reflections. No flashing headlines, no dramatized clips. Keanu spoke about grief, about losing his sister, about the friend who gave him the boots, about the people he'd met who taught him that kindness had more value than anything else money could buy. He told the story of Claire, of the girl on the broken stage, of the boy in the hospital who said, "I don't care about your movies, I just like that you listen." People cried watching it, not because it was sad, but because it felt like something was being repaired inside them, something they didn't know was broken. Back in Los Angeles, Claire watched the full interview alone. She cried too. Then she called her grandmother. "Nana," she said, her voice trembling, "I met someone who reminded me how to live." Her grandmother replied gently, "Then don't forget what he taught you when the noise comes back." That night, Keanu walked down a quiet street, heading home. Someone honked from a car nearby. He looked over and saw a young couple wave excitedly. "Thank you," the girl called out. He nodded back with a smile, his boots softly touching the sidewalk. He didn't stop. He didn't need to. His work wasn't over. Not yet. When silence speaks louder than fame, the sky was gray over Los Angeles, and a light rain tapped against the windows of a tiny diner just off Sunset Boulevard. Inside, the booths were mostly empty, except for one near the corner where Keanu sat, alone, sipping black coffee and reading a worn paperback. He liked places like this. Places that didn't care about red carpets or flashing cameras, just the smell of pancakes, the quiet hum of conversation, and the soft comfort of being unnoticed. But even here, silence couldn't keep everything away. A man walked in. His coat was soaked, his hands shaking slightly. He looked like he hadn't slept. The waitress offered him a menu, but he waved it off. "Just coffee, please," he said. I'm in between things." Keanu glanced up and noticed the man's clothes were thin, damp, and torn at the sleeve. He watched as the man sat near the window, facing away from everyone. Keanu looked at the waitress, then nodded quietly. She understood without a word. 10 minutes later, the man's table had a full plate of hot food, eggs and toast, a steaming bowl of soup. He looked around in surprise. "I didn't order this," the waitress smiled. "Someone else did." He turned to look around, but the only person watching him was Keanu. The man squinted. "Wait, are you—" Keanu raised a finger to his lips. "Just eat. You'll feel better." The man stared for a long second, then nodded. He did eat, and he did feel better. Sometimes dignity is restored not with grand speeches, but with a warm meal and a stranger's kindness. That same evening, Claire stood backstage at another event. This time, it wasn't a party. It was a youth forum, organized entirely by students. She had been invited to speak, not as an organizer or an authority, but as someone who had made a mistake and grown from it. She paced nervously, holding her note cards. Then a voice behind her said, "You don't need those." She turned around. Keanu stood there smiling gently. "You came?" she whispered. "You asked," he replied. "And I said yes." She smiled, nerves still visible. "Just speak from the heart," he said. "It's the only thing people remember." Claire stepped onto the stage. The room was packed. Young people from different schools, different neighborhoods, all there to talk about respect, purpose, and finding strength in being yourself. She cleared her throat. "A few months ago, I asked someone to leave a party because of what he wore. I thought he didn't belong. I thought I was protecting the event. But really, I was only protecting my own ego." She paused. That man was Keanu Reeves. But more importantly, he was kind. He forgave me. He taught me that what you wear doesn't matter. It's how you walk through the world that does. The crowd listened in silence. And so today, I just want to say this. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong, like you weren't good enough, like your clothes or your shoes or your background kept you on the outside, know this. Your heart is what opens doors. Your kindness is what gives you strength. Keanu stood in the back, his arms crossed softly, his face unreadable. But his eyes were full. Later that night, as people left the event, students came up to Claire. Thank you for saying that. You made me feel seen. I don't want to pretend anymore. The words filled her like warmth, but not everyone was happy. Outside the venue, a reporter from a gossip blog waited with a camera. She rushed toward Keanu as he exited. Mr. Reeves, are you trying to rebrand yourself as some kind of humble guru? Is this part of a comeback strategy? Keanu stopped. He looked at her, not with anger, but with something quieter. What's your name? He asked. Nina. Nina, he said, slowly. Do you ever get tired? She blinked. Tired? Of chasing noise. She lowered her camera slightly. He continued. Because there's something softer out there. Something real. But you have to stop shouting to hear it. Then, he walked away. No headline, no argument, just silence. And Nina didn't follow. She just stood there, her recorder off, unsure why her hands were trembling. The next day, the same girl who had tripped on stage weeks ago at the community theater posted a short video online. She was smiling into the camera, holding up a pair of scuffed old boots. I got these at a local thrift store, she said. Someone told me they looked too worn out, but then I remembered a man who helped me stand again, while wearing boots. Just like these. She looked directly at the screen, so I'm wearing them with pride. Her video went viral in the most quiet, meaningful way. Not because of flash, but because it was true. People began posting their own simple clothes. This is what I wear. Free. Walk like Keanu. Kindness boots not for fashion, but for a movement. Claire was walking home when she passed a group of teenagers helping an elderly woman carry groceries across the street. One of them wore a sign on his shirt that read, "Be kind." First, explain later. She smiled and kept walking. Far across town, Keanu sat in a library, listening to a young man read poetry. The room had only 10 people in it. No one recognized him, and that was perfect, because Keanu wasn't looking to be seen. He was looking to see. The legacy of the gray shirt. It was early morning, and the city hadn't fully awakened yet. The streets were quiet, the sun barely cutting through a thin fog. Keanu Reeves walked through a small public park, hands in his jacket pockets, his old, gray shirt visible beneath the layers. He walked without a destination, like someone who had more thoughts than time. Along the path, a jogger slowed down, did a double take, then offered a cautious wave. You're Keanu Reeves, right? He smiled. Only on some days. The jogger laughed and jogged on. Keanu sat on a bench near a fountain, watching a pair of pigeons land on the edge of the water. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded note, yellowed, creased, and handled often. It was a letter from his late friend, the one who had given him the boots. Walk slowly, but keep walking. People will judge, ignore, or laugh. Walk anyway, and when you meet someone in pain, pause. Stay with them. Help them keep walking too. He stared at the words for a long time. This letter had traveled with him. To film sets, charity events, hospital rooms, shelters, classrooms, and quiet places like this park. It had been his compass when fame made the world loud. Now it was time for something more. That afternoon, Claire received a small envelope at her desk. No return address. Inside was the letter, and beneath it, a line written in neat handwriting. Your turn to keep walking. She clutched it to her chest, tears brimming. She knew what it meant. She had already begun speaking at schools, sharing what she'd learned from that one unforgettable night, when she'd judged a man for looking too simple, only to discover how much depth lived behind quiet eyes and worn boots. But now she realized, this story was no longer his alone. It was hers too, and theirs, and everyone's. A year passed. The Rooftop Hotel, once known for its strict dress code and luxury walls, now hosted an annual event called the Walk of Respect. There were no invitations. Anyone could come. The only rule was that you had to share one story of kindness, received or given. People came in suits, t-shirts, aprons, uniforms, and pajamas. Some came barefoot. Every seat was filled, and at the center of the room, placed on a small wooden pedestal, were a pair of worn black boots. The crowd grew silent when Claire stepped forward. They belonged to a man who reminded the world that kindness isn't loud. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't care what you wear. It just walks beside you, quietly, until you're strong enough to walk on your own. She looked at the crowd, now misty-eyed and still. And if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or pushed aside, know this: you were never invisible, just unrecognized. Until now. She stepped away. The band began to play. Not loud, just soft enough to let people feel everything they'd just heard. And somewhere in the back, unnoticed by most, an old man smiled to himself. He wasn't wearing anything fancy, just a gray shirt and boots that looked very familiar. Meanwhile, Keanu had quietly stepped away from Hollywood for a while. He didn't disappear. He just became more present in places where lights didn't shine. He visited small towns and big hearts. He sat at soup kitchens and children's storytelling hours. He helped build a wheelchair ramp outside a bookstore in Kansas. He donated hundreds of simple jackets to people living on the streets, but never gave his name. He kept his phone number in a notebook, not in the cloud. And most days, he still wore the same gray shirt, because it wasn't about the fabric. It was about what it stood for. One morning, a group of students in New York painted a mural on their school wall. It showed a quiet man helping, someone up from the ground, a small smile on his face. No name was included, just one sentence written in blue: "Kindness walks beside us." Their teacher asked who had inspired it. A young boy raised his hand and said, "My mom said there's a guy in Hollywood who doesn't act like Hollywood." The story of Keanu Reeves and the party that tried to turn him away became more than just a headline. It became a movement, not organized, not advertised, but deeply, silently alive. It lived in every quiet act of dignity, every moment someone paused to care, and every child who looked at someone different and chose to smile, not stare. It lived in old boots, gray shirts, and the unshakable belief that you didn't have to wear gold to be golden inside. And in the end, it wasn't about one man. It was about what he reminded us we could all be: gentle, humble, strong in silence, kind without reason, and enough, just as we are.